The restaurant was called Trust. I swear I'm not making that up. That was the name of the place where my life quietly fell apart. It was our engagement dinner. 23 people sitting around a long table with candles and white flower arrangements, the kind that makes everything feel elegant and carefully planned. My mother was sitting on my left, my fiancé Renato was on my right, and Felipe, Renato's brother, was sitting at the end of the table, directly across from me. I had known Felipe for 2 years, ever since Renato and I started dating. He was the friendly brother-in-law, the one who told terrible jokes during Sunday lunches, the one who always showed up late to birthday parties with a last-minute gift, but a warm hug that made up for it. He was easy to like, the kind of person nobody questions. That night, when I raised my glass for the first toast, I looked at Felipe, and he looked away too quickly. Not so quickly that anyone else at the table would notice, but quickly enough for me. It's funny how the body knows things before the mind does. The feeling lasted maybe 2 seconds, but it stayed. During the dinner, I did everything a happy bride is supposed to do. I smiled for photos. I thanked people for coming. I ate the mushroom risotto everyone said was amazing, although I'm not sure I actually tasted it. I accepted another glass of wine. I laughed at jokes, but the entire time, I was building a list in my head. A list of small things that suddenly started making sense in a way I didn't want them to. Let me tell you about the small things. Because big betrayals are usually built from tiny ones. Felipe showed up at our apartment unannounced more often than I thought was normal. Renato never seemed bothered by it. Sometimes they would sit on the balcony talking for hours. Felipe also knew things I had never told him. A restaurant I had casually mentioned to Renato, a trip I was planning, even a comment about maybe changing jobs. I always assumed Renato simply shared everything with his brother, close family. Another thing. Felipe always left family gatherings before I did. He rarely stayed until the end when I was there. I assumed he just liked leaving early. Nothing strange about that. And there was also the way he avoided looking directly at me whenever the topic of our wedding came up. I thought it was just shyness. Some people feel uncomfortable around romance. But sitting at that engagement dinner, those memories started lining up in my mind like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to finish. After dinner, I went to the bathroom. The hallway was narrow and softly lit. Felipe was walking toward me from the opposite direction. For a brief moment, our eyes met, and it happened again. That same tension. Then he looked away. This time I was sure. You can't prove a look. That was my first practical conclusion the next morning. Renato was still asleep next to me. The apartment was quiet in that peaceful Sunday morning kind of way, but inside my chest there was a cold certainty. I needed more than intuition. Not for me. I already knew. But if I was going to make decisions, I needed certainty. Intuition doesn't support big decisions. Evidence does. I spoke with a friend of mine who is a lawyer. I explained everything hypothetically. She listened carefully. Then she said one sentence. Hypothetically, the person in this situation should document what they can and make quiet moves. Quiet moves. That stayed with me. Over the next week, that's exactly what I did. I reviewed our financial situation. The apartment was in Renato's name, which actually made things simpler. There were no joint accounts, no shared investments, nothing complicated to separate. My savings account was still mine, and the family jewelry my grandmother had given me was still in my closet. Then one Wednesday afternoon, I spoke to my boss. I asked about a possible transfer to another office across the city. She thought for a moment, then said something unexpected. There's actually an opening there. I told her I was interested. I left that conversation feeling something strange. Control. The toast happened 3 weeks later. It was a family lunch. Just Renato's family this time. His mother, his father, Felipe, an aunt, 2 cousins. My mother couldn't attend. Looking back, that might have been better. because I already knew this was the moment. Lunch was normal. We talked. We laughed. I even laughed at one of Felipe's terrible jokes, without looking at him for too long. Then Renato's father stood up with a glass. He made a speech about family and the future. Everyone raised their glasses. I raised mine too. Then I said, "May I make a toast as well?" Everyone agreed happily. I took a breath and said, "I'd like to toast to honesty, because it's the thing I value most in a family. And unfortunately, it isn't always present." The silence lasted 3 seconds, but it felt longer. I placed my glass down, picked up my purse, looked at Renato, and said quietly, "We need to talk tonight, at home." Then I left, calmly. I said goodbye to his mother, and walked out. He arrived home 40 minutes later. The conversation was long. First he denied everything, then he stopped denying, then he tried to explain, then he said it was complicated. I listened. No crying, no screaming. When he finished, I said 3 things. First, I didn't need confirmation, because I already knew. Second, the ring was on the living room table. Third, I had accepted the job transfer and would move in 3 weeks. He could keep the apartment. He looked at me like I was someone else. Maybe I was. 3 weeks later, I moved out. The last thing he said was, "You deserved better." I answered, "I know." And I left. Now I live in a smaller apartment, but it's mine. The new office is better. My new boss is better. I hear from a distance that Renato and Felipe no longer speak. Brothers who cut ties. A family divided. I never joined those conversations. I never posted anything. I simply moved on. Sometimes people ask if I feel angry. Sometimes. But it's a small anger. The kind that fit inside the suitcase I carried out of that apartment. What stayed with me was something else. The realization that I can feel something deep inside, recognize it, and respond with dignity instead of chaos. And that, I learned, is not a small thing.